to the Authority File, the academic library podcast from Choice. Choice is a publishing division of the ACRL and the publisher of Choice Reviews and CC Advisor. This episode is brought to you by Credo. I'm Bill Mickey, the host of the podcast and the editorial director at Choice, and for this 4-episode series, my guests and I will be discussing how orientation and engagement factor into the first-year experience. These discussions are part of a longer series on the first-year experience that Credo is presenting with Choice. Last month, we looked at some of the other components that help make a successful first-year experience program, namely collaboration and information literacy. But for the next episode, I'll be joined by Ray Pun, a doctoral student in educational leadership at California State University, Fresno, Andrew Carlos, STEM and Web Services librarian at Cal State East Bay, and Danielle Rapu, library systems and assessment librarian at Pasadena City College. In this final episode of our 4-part series, our guests talk about library anxiety, where it comes from, and how to specifically help students overcome it, and how librarians can attract members of the library community other than undergraduate students. All right, Danielle, in the first episode, you talked a little bit about anxiety, student anxiety coming into the library. And I'm wondering, if we could sort of touch on that once again and have you talk a little bit about what you might think is the biggest anxiety inducer for first-year students when they come to the library, or in students more generally. Are there specific things they tend to be anxious about, or is it sort of the overall experience to them?
While it is the overall experience, I think there are definitely major contributing factors. So one of the things that I think really stresses students out in general about college is the expectation and change from public education, where their required materials are provided to them, that in college they are required to obtain textbooks, and a lot of times the financial strain on purchasing textbooks is an issue for students, and it does cause them anxiety. And one of the ways that libraries support them in community colleges is we do have a textbook reserve, and we also have allocated specific funding to purchase highly used textbooks and materials that are OER based, oftentimes are only digitally available, so the library will order print versions of those to be accessible to the students. And that's been one of the ways that we've been able to highly connect with our student population in those first few weeks when they're experiencing that anxiety, is to help them find the book that they need. And oftentimes students are still intending to purchase their books, but maybe the bookstore ran out, or they don't have a financial aid check that can help them purchase the books. And so being able to be that support for them in that time, I feel like is a great way to make those initial connections with students. And I know Ray mentioned in the book, the OER book that he had mentioned earlier, the FYE Guide Practices, he talks about when his memory of going to the library was that the librarian told him that the textbooks were not available to borrow there, and so it kind of gave him the impression that he didn't need to use the library. And traditionally, that is where the libraries were at. I think philosophically is that we don't buy consumable materials such as like the tearaway pages, workbooks, or that we usually don't spend book funding on textbooks. But I feel like the sentiment and the philosophy is changing in that we really need to meet them where they're at and what they're asking for, and the need is really to support them in those first few weeks and throughout the semester in providing them the required materials when we can. So I think that's been a really great way to support and alleviate the anxiety those first few weeks.
Can you talk a little bit, Danielle, about how, I imagine students don't tend to know that opportunity is there for them. How is that communicated to them specifically?
Sure. So there's a number of ways this gets communicated to them. Helpfully, professors will let their students know that the required material is on reserve. So that's where that connection again with faculty becomes very important, where we need to let them know that we have the books available. So sometimes a part-time professor or adjunct professor will use the same book as a colleague in their department is using, but sometimes doesn't know that that book is on reserve and available for their students. So really making those faculty connections and really making them aware of what we have available really helps. And so what we do is we get a full list of all the required material textbooks from the bookstore, and we work to really figure out what is already in our collection and what we can add to the collection that makes most sense and will get most use, and then connect with faculty and let them know what's on reserve, so that way they can connect with the students, because again, that's who they spend the most time with, is in the classroom with their professors. So the best form of connection is through the professor. And then also we have a really great support team of academic counselors who are also aware of our services. So when they're doing their academic advising and they talk about the cost of textbooks, or they get them familiar with what's expected, the counselors will also advise, you can look to see if this is in the library. And that, I feel like, has really been facilitated because we have the counseling classes and we keep their books on reserve. So they are aware of that resource because they themselves use it for their credit program.
Okay. Excellent. And then Ray, Andrew, anything you'd like to add there in terms of, where the anxiety tends to manifest itself and why?
Yeah, so similar to Danielle, we also have textbook reserves available, but we've also started purchasing textbooks that are like at the highest price point first. So we've been slowly building up our textbook collection, which has been really nice for us. We've also developed a little website where we have our e-textbooks available. So a lot of times our students don't even know that we have an electronic version of the textbooks available, and they prefer that because a lot of times you just download like a PDF of a chapter or whatever and print it yourself, and it's like you don't have to worry about waiting for the textbook to come back from one of your classmates who checked it out, because it's always available online.
Okay.
So that's been really nice for us.
Great. Ray, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with what was said about the textbooks. I think another key area that has created a lot of anxiety for first-year students when they come to the library is the practice of writing. So a lot of students, they are not confident in their writing abilities. They struggle with writing because, as we all know, research and writing, they're connected. So for them to think of how they wrote their essays back in high school, like a 5-paragraph structure, doesn't necessarily apply in this context where you're writing a expository or a research paper, argumentative paper. And so I think when they come to the library, they obviously would like the sources to help them. But I've also noticed when I was at the reference desk at Fresno State, a lot of them also have completed their papers, and then they need evidence to support what they've already written. But it's sort of like, that's not the best way to do it. But I think writing is also an iterative process, right? It's not just you write a draft, you do research, or you do your research, write, and then you're done. It's actually, it kind of goes back and forth. And so I think, the anxiety is that students are not comfortable with their writing, their, let's say, grammar and research skills, and how do they address the prompt that their instructor is giving to them? Like, how do they make sense of this assignment that says, go to the library, do some research, and write a paper? And it's like, that's when they start talking to the librarians like me to figure out, what does this professor want? What are they trying to say?
Are your first-year students great researchers? Let's be honest, the answer is probably no. Websites like Google and Wikipedia have spoiled users with convenience while flooding the information landscape with sources ranging from shoddy to outright duplicitous. Credo Online Reference Service can help. Its user-friendly interface gives students the convenience they expect, paired with the authoritative content librarians demand. Features like topic pages, the mind map, and real-time reference make it ideal for demoing the research process during instruction. Visit corp.credoreference.com for more details and to download the interactive Credo FYE guide, Practices for Enhancing Instruction, which features prominent librarians offering step-by-step activity plans and best practices. One of the things I'd like to talk to all of you a little bit more about is if you could sort of address some of the ways, this has kind of popped up in our conversations so far, but I'm hoping we can sort of flesh it out a bit more in some of the ways your first year experience programming draws in members of the library community other than students. So in other words, what are some of the intentional efforts you're all doing to attract and engage faculty and other staff from around the institution, and even what are some of the more unintended but also beneficial partnerships that are coming out of this. And Ray, why don't we stick with you here?
Yeah, sure. I had mentioned this in a previous podcast for a specific kind of topic on Wikipedia Editathon. I'm going to mention it for this one as well, but this one specifically on Women's Her Story. So when I was at Fresno State, for the first 3 years, I had organized a Women's Her Story Wikipedia Editathon, where it's a community event that's in the library, that's open to the public, and also to students and faculty to come and edit and enhance Wikipedia entries, specifically on women's entries. And we were more interested in having participants of people of different backgrounds to be involved, particularly women, because we know that Wikipedia is currently, a lot of it is edited by men specifically, and so we would like that perspective to have women involved in utilizing our library resources to enhance the Wikipedia entries out there. Mm-hmm. And it comes out really nicely because we've had a lot of community members, but a lot of women's studies professors got involved, and also English and history, and then the students would come and they would get extra credit if they came and edited an entry or done some research for an article. And we had students working on women's rights in Honduras, to women in Uzbekistan, to specific feminist icons. And so I think that has garnered a lot of attention, where we were able to actually create assignments. I worked closely with our women's studies librarian, Bang Bang, at Fresno State, and we were able to embed these assignments and the actual workshops into the women's studies classes, and it was a great opportunity to build on that. So these kinds of community events can really lead itself to all different opportunities where faculty can see that it doesn't have to be a one-shot demo. It could be a Wikipedia sort of a program where they can utilize databases and print materials and understand that there's a lot of library resources to enhance and improve Wikipedia entries.
That's a great example. And Danielle, how about you?
Yeah, I would say having some level of engagement through programming is really helpful. So for our first year experience students, they are offered an opportunity to come to the library the day before their poster is due. And the reason why we started doing that is because we would see students the day before or day of in the library, last minute putting together the poster, just trying to get it done, and we would see them sometimes asking for supplies from us, or they would bring their own supplies, but maybe they were limited on the types of supplies they had. And so we started a late night program the day before the poster session that they present, and the students came to the library and were welcomed, and there was extra librarians available. So typically we only have one librarian on staff in the evening times, and of course the library support staff as well. But for this special event, we actually stayed open extra late and extended our library hours, and had 3 librarians available to support them and answer questions. And we offered free printing, and we brought in boba tea for them, and it was a definite success. We had over 70 students show, and many of them stayed until the very end when we closed the library. And it was definitely a good way for us to see the small ways that we can support them in just extending hours or offering a welcoming space where they can collaborate together in these large group projects. Really helped elevate the library's visibility to them, that they know we are offering these resources, but that we also want to offer them specific programming that fits their specific needs, which in this case were to finish that poster and get that culminating project in the next day.
Right. And then I think you mentioned when we last spoke that the next day when it's presentation time for the posters, that there's faculty that come in and help judge the posters and evaluate them as well, right? So you're pulling in faculty into,
Yeah, so the library faculty and our teaching faculty are all invited to be judges for the posters. And then independent of that process, the librarians themselves also go around, and we try to kind of spread out, because there's hundreds of posters. There's a lot of groups together that are presenting that day. It's a very huge event that we do outdoors, because our indoor space doesn't hold that many. And we assess using a rubric how well the posters meet some of the information literacy skills that we teach during the sessions when all the classes come to visit, because we follow, just for continuity, the same lesson plan for all the librarians that teach that class. We all share that responsibility. And so once that poster session is live and students are presenting, we use that rubric to assess how some students were able to meet those information literacy skills, or demonstrate those skills rather. And sometimes, we find students that are using maybe not so credible sources, or perhaps they're omitting citations altogether, or sometimes it's very minor errors, but we use that rubric to kind of see where certain posters might fall on the rubric, and then compile that for assessment purposes later.
Okay, excellent. And then Andrew, just wanted to give you a chance here too. I mean, what are some of the ways you found that the FYE programming tends to draw in participants from other than students from the library community?
Yeah, so one of the things that we run a lot are gaming events.
Yeah.
We've actually seen that it's expanded a little bit. It's not just students who are showing up. We've actually had faculty, and some faculty have even brought their children to our events. We've also had some staff show up. So it's been really nice, because it's given us the opportunity to show that the library is not just a place for them to get research help, but it's also a place for them to start building connections and community with each other. Because I've seen students and even staff, faculty just meet at our gaming events, and then I see them later on collaborating or talking to each other, or knowing who to go to for support. So it's been really nice helping to develop a sense of community for our campus through our FYE events, and specifically our gaming events. So it's been kind of a really nice boost for me, because it's for me, gaming is just a personal interest, but to see that other people are invested in it and actually getting something out of it has been really nice.
That was Ray Pun, Andrew Carlos, and Danielle Rapu. This concludes the final episode of our 4-part series on how orientation and engagement factor into the first-year experience. This episode was brought to you by Credo. Find all of the episodes of The Authority File on your favorite podcast app or on our website, choice360.org. Just click on the librarianship dropdown. On choice360.org, you'll also find information on Choice's entire product platform, including Choice Reviews, CC Advisor, Choice Webinars, resources for college libraries, our white papers, and a whole lot more. A great way to keep up with the Authority File is to join the Choice Authority File Facebook group, which you can access via the Choice Reviews Facebook page. As a member of the group, you can give us feedback, suggest podcast participants, chat with other listeners, and submit new topic ideas. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.